Today we're going to Laramie, Wyoming for a cold case that sounds like it should have been solved decades ago.
A young woman was murdered and there was a clear suspect. He even seemed to confess.
It's time to preview the coldest case in Laramie.
That's on this episode of So Much Crime.
So little time.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff.
Welcome to our preview of the coldest case in Laramie.
And stick around later because we have a true crime question of the week.
Never heard of the coldest case of Laramie? Why do I have to keep repeating this? You're in the right place.
In these preview episodes, we tell you just a little bit about what this series is.
We don't discuss anything past the first episode, so there are no spoilers for what's to come.
And there's a link to the coldest case in Laramie in our show notes.
Next time in our full recap, we'll discuss the whole series. But right now, we just want to decide if this is a crime that is worth your time. This crime, Jeff, it happened on October 20th, 1985. And do you know what that was?
A great time for music and movies.
So freaking good. It is so hard to narrow down this. I think this is a great example of why people should join Patreon, because we are going to go through a snippet, like a teeny tiny morsel of the greatness that was happening in October 1985 when it comes to music, when it comes to movies. But if you go on to patreon.com/so much crime, so little time, you will be able to subscribe for a really, really tiny amount. And you will be able to hear even more of the great movies and the flat reads of some absolute bangers that were going on in 1985. So, Jeff.
All right, Dee. I have a flat read of a song for you. This is one where I feel like the odds of us doing the same song or movie are very high, but
I think you're forgetting how slow movies and songs got to Ireland in the 80s.
All right, so I have...
Remember the condoms, Jeff.
I forgot about that. All right.
And for anyone who needs context on that comment, go back and listen to The Home Babies. That is a few episodes before this one in your feed.
Out of context, that's a strange comment.
Yeah, I know. I'd realised that after I said it.
Are you ready for a flat read?
Oh, go for it.
Okay. We're talking away. I don't know what I'm to say. I'll say it anyway. Today is another day to find you. Shying away. I'll be coming for your love, okay?
Keep going.
The next line is the title of the song.
Okay, go to something else then. Tell me another part.
I'm going to give you a clue.
Okay.
It's a Norwegian band.
Oh, hold on. Go back to the start of the flat read.
We're talking away. I don't know what I'm to say. I'll say it anyway. Today is another day to find you. Shying away. I'll be coming for your love, okay?
No, I got nothing.
Take on
me. Take on me. Take me on.
That's it. Aha is the band. Yeah. Yep.
That's hilarious.
It's a great song.
What a tune.
It's a great song.
Do you want a song or a movie?
Let's do songs.
Even though there may be times it seems I'm far away, but never wonder where I am, 'cause I'm always by your side.
Wait, is that it?
The whispers in the morning of lovers sleeping tight are rolling by like thunder now as I look into your eyes.
Wow.
I'm trying to be robotic here.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know this.
You definitely do. 'Cause I'm your lady and you are my man.
Yep.
Wherever you reach for me.
Who is this by?
Jennifer Rush.
I don't know that name, but I know that song.
Do all that I can. It's The Power of Love. You know that even from Celine Dion, surely.
These are not songs that I purchased at any point, but they were just in the air, and I know of them.
I feel like I'm a little offended that you didn't know that song at all.
I know that song. I have no idea who the artist is.
Oh no, I didn't know about Jennifer Rush. I presumed you knew because you were probably grown up by then.
I
but
was a
not even
small
born.
child in 1985. All right. You have a movie? All right. What's your movie?
He was never in time for his classes. He wasn't in time for his dinner. Then one day he wasn't in his time at all.
I think it might just be Back to the Future.
What a movie.
So other than Back to the Future, which of course was the best movie of 1985, I think, and Michael J. Fox had 2 movies out that summer. Do you know the other one?
No.
This is peak Michael J. Fox because he was on Family Ties, which was a show I loved. Back to the Future came out, and then something like 2 or 3 months later, Teen Wolf came out. Which, have you not seen Teen Wolf? Oh,
Nope.
Teen Wolf is the movie where Michael J. Fox is a teenage werewolf, and he discovers that. But then it turns out when he is a werewolf, he is great at basketball. And so he leans into that, even though his parents, they're a family of werewolves, and they try to keep that a secret. But of course, he goes public with his werewolfness because it makes him a basketball star, and everyone likes him, and he's cool. Sequel to Teen Wolf 2. Michael J. Fox did not appear in that. Instead, taking over the role was...
Do you have this written down, or is this
Nope,
just
this is all in my
memorized?
brain. Is Jason Bateman from Arrested Development and many other fine projects. But funny thing about that, his sister, Justine Bateman, played Michael J. Fox's sister, Mallory, on Family Ties.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the 80s. Bar the lack of contraception.
Maybe selectively back to the 80s. All right.
All right, Jeff. So this podcast was released in February 2023. Publisher, it was brought to us by Serial Productions and the New York Times. Its host is Kim Barker. It's got 8 episodes, all about like 20 to 35-ish minutes. So not too hefty of an
No, and
undertaking.
then the story, so the story as we hear it in the first episode, it's about a woman named Shelli Wiley. She was murdered in 1985. She was 22 years old at the time. This happened in Laramie, hence the name of the show. She was attacked. I think we don't hear a ton about the crime. We know that she was stabbed and then her apartment was set on fire. The murder was never solved at the time, but there was this cop named Fred Lamb who was actually arrested in 2016 and seemingly confessed to the crime, but then charges were dropped against him. And so what we hear about in this episode is just a little bit of the background of the story, and then we hear from Shelli Wiley's niece, Brandy, who seemingly has been pursuing the case, or pursuing the Fred Lamb story, really pestering the cops and the prosecutor on the case, trying to get some action on this, trying to get some justice for her aunt. And we also hear just a little bit about how when this murder happened in 1985, what it did to the family. So it really kind of tore this family apart. So we just learned a little bit about that. And that's pretty much it. The first episode is pretty short. We don't get a ton more information beyond that. So Dee, where do you want to start with this one?
I thought it was interesting the way the host, Kim Barker, set it up. When she thinks about it, she often thinks back to Shelli Wiley, because she wasn't too far behind her in life. You know, Shelli Wiley was like on Kim Barker's like trajectory. She was like in college. You know, she was just that bit older than her. It wasn't too far off how she might have seen herself, and it was a good connection. We often talk about liking the host to have a connection to the story they're telling. But for this, it's the connection that she knows where she's from, but also that she was just a couple of years behind her. And I don't know. I don't know if you have any memories when you were in school or growing up of someone a little bit ahead of you. And, you know, it doesn't have to be a situation where someone, you know, was murdered, as is the case with Shelli Wiley. But there's definitely people over the years that I look back and I see and I said like, oh my goodness, they're so cool. Or like, I want to be like them when I grow up. And then when you get to their age, you have a different maybe perspective on what they might have been going through, or, you know, their life circumstances at that stage. And I don't know, I found that kind of compelling. I could really connect to that because I feel like that's something that I would have done when I was 15, 16, as Kim Barker was, when this actually happened, when Shelli Wiley was actually murdered.
Yeah, particularly in those early like formative years, right? Like when
Yeah.
you're in high school, when you're whether you're in middle school, high school, or college. I think that definitely makes sense. And one of the things that this reminded me of is like the starting with the setting of the place reminded me of West Cork a little bit as like a rugged out there
Mm.
place. But then the host connection actually reminded me of the Crossbow Killer with Meg Perry,
Mm.
where he had personal connections to the place. It was kind of woven throughout the story. I'm curious to see how much of Kim Barker's experience is woven throughout the rest of this series.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
So aside from the opening, it's an unusual way that we kind of get to this story. This murder happened in 1985. It's a cold case. Kim Barker basically explains how she came to be working on this story, which was during the pandemic, needed a story, and looked up this case and realized that, okay, this was in 2021, I think, that Kim Barker started working on this. And by just Googling Shelli Wiley, found that there actually was an arrest several years before that, but 2016, which seems like kind of a random year for this story to resurface. That's when the main suspect, Fred Lamb, was arrested and initially had charges brought against him for this case. Seemed to confessed in kind of a weird way, right? Like there was,
Fred Lamb
he said,
did it.
yeah, in the third person, but then he said, also he said, bottom line is I killed a girl. So like he seemingly outright admitted it. So that was 2016. But Shelli Wiley is looking at this in 2021, 2022. And by that point, Fred Lamb the charges had been dropped, but then decides to contact some family members. So that's how Kim gets in touch with
Brandy. Well, Brandy put up a post though, didn't she?
I think so. Yeah. So Brandy is Shelley's niece. Brandy's mother, Lori, is Shelley's younger sister. Right. So kind of a weird entry point. And we hear the initial conversation over, I think, Zoom or whatever.
I loved it.
Yeah, between Kim and Brandy, but also Lori is there.
It was there's something so raw about it because they're having this conversation and it's very much like, okay, I figure you guys want to know what I'm going to come in with, like what my angle is here, so I'm going to tell you. So we're hearing that part. You're even hearing when Kim is like, "Oh, sorry, I've actually moved into the bathroom because my dog is he's been really loud right now," and the host is like in the bathroom. I don't know. I love that. I felt like that connection, the really raw like footage or clip from that call, kind of brought it gives life to this case. Where if Kim Barker had just told the story in episode 1, told the background, it would have been a much flatter situation. But she brings in this very raw, like it's a real. Is it a juxtaposition? It's a real stark comparison between, I'm just telling a story from my point of view and all these facts that I've grabbed, versus this is very raw footage of like a primary source interview or an interview with a primary source.
So I agree with all that. I think on top of that, it's unusual in that, I guess if you had just told me who was involved with this, I would have presumed that it was Shelley's sister, Lori, who would have been the main person pursuing this, but it's not. It's the niece.
I love that. And you know what? She's deadly, isn't she?
She's great.
She's great. She's a powerhouse. love that she was like fighting for the case to be punted to Cheyenne, which is obviously a district close by, or a state.
It's a city. Cheyenne is a larger city.
I knew it was not a state. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Cheyenne is a larger city than Laramie. It's kind of the next city over from Laramie. Yeah, I think it's maybe the biggest city in Wyoming.
Yeah, so she's trying to like get it moved there, and she's in like conversation with people there who want to take the case, and then she's calling every day. She's calling Peggy Trent every day, who's the prosecutor in this case. And so funny. Peggy Trent like sometimes doesn't answer her calls, so she just keeps calling her every day. And then eventually calls this lawyer in Cheyenne, is like, let's get Peggy to like hand it over. And Peggy's so annoyed that she calls Brandy's grandma and like tells on her. Why doesn't she call her mother? Allegedly. Why doesn't she call her mother? She calls her grandma and being like, you're one up the road. She's the one. I'm like, oh my God. I don't know. I just think Brandy's hilarious.
Which,
I guess
we'll find out.
Add her to the list.
I guess we'll find out how effective this is. But it seems like from what we've heard that I mean, this is kind of how some of these cold cases stay
Yeah.
alive, is it takes somebody, whether it's a family member or just somebody who takes up the case, who just has to be annoying about it. You just have to keep pestering someone until something happens that you want to happen. So I'm really curious to hear how that goes. I also want to call out, so this is a short episode. I think if you take out the ads, it's maybe just over 20 minutes long. But in addition to the things we've mentioned, there's a bunch of like really specific details that we get, a couple that are clues to the case, but then a couple that I think are just fascinating. So I have one of each. One that's just fascinating is we hear about Shelli and her younger sister Lori, who kept a joint notebook that was a Garfield notebook, which in 1985, Garfield would have been the odds-on favorite to be on the cover of a notebook that you would buy.
Yeah.
But they did it from the perspective of a cat, which I love that detail. It's just a little like throwaway detail that gives you a little insight into the relationship between these two sisters. The other thing that I'm sure you picked up on was there's a mention that Fred Lamb, when they initially interviewed him in 1985, had a cut on his hand. So this has come up before in other cases we've talked about where, and this, I don't know why, this detail just has stuck in my head. I think this first came up in the Karen Stitt case, where we learn that blood is really slippery. And in stabbing cases,
I remember you being
are,
shocked about that with the Karen Stitt case.
Yeah, your hands are going to slip. You're going to have cuts on your hands.
But it also came up in West Cork, if you remember the film that was been taken at the Christmas Day swim. A reporter was just there, happened to be there, and you know, in the film, the clip, you can see that Ian Bailey had like an injured hand. I mean, when we talk about questions on this, Jeff, like what happened in 1985?
I presume this is the same reason why Brandy wanted this moved out of Laramie was this is a good old boys kind of cops protect their own situation. It reeks of that at this moment. Maybe we'll find out more. I presume we'll find out more. That's the whole point of continuing to listen to this. But that's seemingly
it happens
where this
again
is going.
I don't get it for 2016. I don't know whether in 1985 it was just a case that they just didn't realize, and you know, the thought wasn't there that maybe someone might be involved, might be pretending to help. I don't know that, but in 2016 maybe they were like, well, that's not how we do it now, and if this comes out, the whole police force is going to look bad. I'm not agreeing with this, but I'm just saying like that could be the case. But and the other thing that's so frustrating is like the lack of police communication with the family, and even like not even just the police, but like the prosecutor, them having to ring up the whole time. That's infuriating.
Well, and that one other detail about when Brandy does call the police after Fred is arrested,
yes,
and the one cop basically whispers into the phone, "You need to pursue this. Don't stop."
Yes.
That speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yes, it's giving so much. This feels like a movie I would have watched growing up and been like, whoa, kind of outrageous. Like nobody's actually like that. It
does. It also, you know what it kind of feels like a Columbo episode.
Yeah.
Where we know what happens. We know who did it. Seemingly, allegedly, apparently.
I mean, to be fair, if this is a Columbo episode, there might be there's going to be curveballs in there. It's not just going to be a straight line.
From what we're presented in this first episode, it is strongly suggested that we know who did it. It's just a matter of will he get caught or not.
Yeah.
And if so, how?
Yeah, and I think that leads in a little bit to like my frustrations. And I actually have nothing about the podcast. I think this was a really solid first episode. Not that shocking, kind of This American Life-y, because Kim Barker, Serial, New York Times. You know, it's on point with exactly like up
same vein.
My alley in terms of the production. I thought it was really, really well done. But it's the story. The police, frustrating. Seriously, so frustrating when you hear another story about the police just being like that bros club. I can't stand it. I nearly prefer laziness over this whole I'll look after you kind of business.
Yeah.
It does my nut in. I think the standout thing for me from this episode, and it wasn't dramatized, nothing was laid on thick, But it was really the impact of Shelli's death on her entire family. Not obviously her. But, you know, and when we're talking, we hear a lot from Brandy and Laurie, Shelli's sister. But, you know, her brother, who never gets over it, he becomes an alcoholic by the sounds of it. The dad who's becomes a recluse, and when he dies, he's like the funeral announcement, her death announcement in his pocket. Oh, this broke my heart.
Yeah. No, it definitely seemed to tear the family apart, and it was super sad. But I think that's right. I think, again, this is an episode that packs a significant amount of information and story, and really paints, I think, a very clear picture right from the beginning, where we learn about Laramie. If you don't know anything about Laramie, which I guess you didn't know anything about Laramie, you get a sense of it, right? Like, you get a powerful sense of this as a rough place with some authenticity, because this is where our host is from.
Yeah. She
speaks with authority, which is great, I think. How eager are you to keep listening?
Oh, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in. This lad needs to get his comeuppance.
Let's find out. Let's keep listening. I'm definitely in with you.
This is a crime I'm feeling that is worth our time, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you know what else is worth our time? patreon.com/so much crime so little time. If you go in there, you get early release episodes, some bonus content, really good outtakes. You wouldn't believe what Jeff said to me in the last preview episode. Hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing, which actually never happens because he's not that funny. Support us in making this show, and also, while you're at it, don't forget to rate us. Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. 5 stars only, please. And yes, thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you.
All right, Dee, it's time for our true crime question of the week. So, as we've talked about, the intro to this podcast paints Laramie, Wyoming as a really rough, violent place. And so I thought it'd be interesting to discuss, how does that color your perception, not of Laramie, but of the story? So there's other podcasts that we've listened to, other stories we've heard, where it starts with something to the effect of, it was a peaceful town, and, you know, nothing like this ever happened here. But this is the other end of that spectrum of, this was a violent town where horrible things happened to a lot of people. How does that make you walk into this story?
It put me on edge. It created kind of a turbulent feeling in my stomach. So I'm not flat, I'm not calm.
It's unsettling.
Unsettling is a good word. It's kind of creating something in me that is like, okay, this is obviously going to be bad because it's a true crime podcast. Like, they're generally not great in terms of like calming and reassuring. But this in particular is, even if it's a bad crime, which we've dealt with a lot of, there's a worse element going on here, because there's badness kind of seeping in through the soil. There's badness kind of everywhere you look, as opposed to somewhere like West Cork, even, where we're talking about people get on with each other. And yeah, of course, there's bits and pieces going on. But generally speaking, the man down the pub wants to name a sandwich after you, and your son will come in 20 years' time and we'll still have a chit chat about it. There's like that welcoming nature. No, this is... I'd run out of it. Wouldn't run into it, you know?
I think that makes sense. I would also say that I think those stories that we hear that are at the other end of the spectrum, where it's sort of this was a peaceful town and it's hard to believe that some horrible crime like this could happen here, sort of ring false in a way. Like, I think there's something fake about that, because I think these kinds of things happen anywhere. These kinds of things, anywhere where there's people, bad things can happen.
Whoa.
Is that too dark?
I mean, is that your outlook on humanity? Just like, anywhere there is people. And I know it's not that you're not right, but
I think those types of openings set up it's almost like a false sense of contrast, or a false sense of security, or they play into biases or prejudices.
I actually totally disagree. Like, I think, you know, it's a numbers game, actually. Because if you're looking at a big city, like, of course, worse things, like the worst of the worst, you're going to hear of loads of different crimes in a big city. Like, it's not going to be shocking. Also, people don't talk about these things as much because they're more spread out. People don't know each other as much. But in a small community, it's not shocking that less horrendous things happen because there's just less people.
Okay, well, statistically speaking, yes. But I think there's an implication in an opening like that people are better than that, or it's inherently safer. But I appreciate the acknowledgement that a lot of people go through a lot of bad things. And Laramie is a small town.
I think you're being a bit cynical. I think there are genuine cases where somewhere is just really peaceful and, you know, people just get on with it and people are nice. Not everyone's best friends, but...
Okay, let me talk about a specific case. So we made reference earlier to the Karen Stitt case, which happened in Sunnyvale, which is a town we know to be one of the safest, quote, safest towns in America where there's very little violent crime.
Are you going to make me not be able to sleep tonight and tell me all the bad things that have happened in Sunnyvale?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that.
Well, now you have to.
Okay. My point is, and this maybe is a point that you can legitimately disagree with, is that when you say something like that, you paint a picture of a place where people are almost incapable of doing these things. And so that when something like that happens, like the Karen Stitt case, which is a horrific murder that happened there, that it is so much more shocking. This is where my point about like biases and things comes in, is that I feel like there's an implicit sort of, to take it to an extreme of, oh, that doesn't happen in a community like ours to people like us. That happens to different types of people, worse people, different people, other people. But our type of people, this is not a thing that we deal with. And to me, that's sort of steeped in prejudices, and whether it's racism or all kinds of things, classism, you know, that's something that happens in those parts of town, those parts of the city. I think there's something that rings false about that to me. That's my point.
Yeah, I don't know. I have thoughts and feelings, and I don't know if they're okay to say, but I'll say them really quickly, and we can just cut them out if they're not. But I see where you're coming from. I do see where you're coming from in certain situations. But I also see that in some places it is peaceful and violent crimes aren't the norm. And unfortunately, in certain areas, violent crimes happen quite a lot, so they are normalized, because that is what happens when things happen more and more. I think there is, we can't just play this down to us and them, or it happens there, it doesn't happen here. It's a race thing. I think there's so much involved. It's all of that packed into one thing. But I don't think that takes away from the fact that sometimes you can, in fact, have somewhere where these things do not happen. That is sometimes the case.
I don't think I disagree with that. I think this is one where we're not as far apart as it sounds like. I think we're more aligned than it sounds. Either way, I don't think this podcast is making Laramie out to be our next vacation destination.
Oh, I don't know. I've already booked the Airbnb, no?
Next time, we're going to explore all of the Shelli Wiley case.
What happened when her niece fought for justice? And how exactly did Fred Lamb not face charges?
That's on the next So Much Crime,
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.